And good morning, everyone. Just got a little countdown in there to help me figure this stuff out. See if I can get this fixed. Alrighty. Well, we are in Pilgrim's Progress this morning. If you have not been able to follow along or you'd like to follow along, let's see here. I'm always trying to improve this setup. So I love doing this type of stuff, but I'm not always. Sometimes I can get caught up in how perfect the setup is, and then I just don't get stuff done. So forgive me if this isn't extremely perfect, but I've been trying to get this to upload. I had a couple people tell me, "Hey, can you get this to go to Instagram?" And the answer to that is I'm trying, but it's not that simple. So, anyways, we are back in Pilgrim's Progress this morning. I had my page saved, and now it is. No, we don't have it saved. Where are we at? Come on. There we go. So we entered when we finished yesterday talking about Christian's discussion conversation with Evangelist, and Evangelist is admonishing Christian for his decision to go up the hill of good works, to go up Mount Sinai. And you know what? I don't even think my microphone is attached. Let's see if that improves the quality of the sound. Alrighty, there we go. So where are we? So Evangelist finishes up his conversation with Evangelist here, and we're going to pick up from where we left off. We have a bit of scripture to go through this morning. So let me just finish off with, or start where we finished off yesterday. He gives three reasons, three things in the counsel of worldly wise men to avoid and to really, he says, to utterly abhor. He says the reason why you need to hate the counsel of Mr. Worldly Wise Man is because his turning thee out of the way, his laboring to render to the cross odious to thee. So that simply meaning his work to make it the cross to be repugnant, to be distasteful, to really cause him to lose his desire to the cross. And then he says, and his setting thy feet in that way that leadeth unto the ministration of death. So leading him into the way of his own works, his own obedience. And we know that the law always brings death. So from that point, we are going to pick up. He says, secondly, thou must abhor his laboring to render the cross odious to thee. So that's what it was. Yesterday, we kind of explored that first point where he says you must hate the fact that he turns you out of the way. And he says, then he's going to go ahead and now going to explore the second point that he says is laboring to render the cross odious to thee, to make the cross lose its value. For thou art to prefer it before the treasures of the Egyptians. This is found in Hebrews chapter 11:25. Now I'm taking time to go through the various passages that are mentioned here because I believe, well, they're here for a reason, so we need to stop and look at them, but also I think there is some danger in translating or what's the word I'm looking for? Interpreting what exactly it is that John Bunyan said. And I believe he put these notes in here, he put in these references so that we would not interpret anything incorrectly, and that what we interpreted was indeed the truth of the scriptures. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 25. Hebrews 11:25 says this, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. So uh, that follows the verse by faith. Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. So we are to prefer, we're supposed to hate the way of legalism because it it causes us to not want to endure the persecution, the affliction that comes with going the way of the cross. Besides, the King of glory hath told thee that he that will save his life shall lose it. And he that comes after him and hates not his father, his mother, and his wife, and his children, his brethren, and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. So this is a reference to Mark chapter 8 and verse 35. Mark chapter 8 and verse 35. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. So this is a common thread, a common theme among religious folks, self-righteous people, is the attempt to save yourself, the attempt to find self-justification, to find justification and self-obedience. And Christ simply says, if you seek to save your own life, you will lose it. I say, therefore, for a man to labor to persuade thee, that shall be thy death, without which the truth hath said, thou canst not have eternal life. This doctrine thou must abhor. You must hate the doctrine that leads you out of the way and into the way of death. He says, thirdly, thou must hate his setting of thy feet in the way that leadeth to the ministration of death. And for this thou must consider to whom he sent thee, and also how unable that person was to deliver thee from thy burden. If you, before I move on, if you want to leave a comment, if you're listening, feel free to leave a comment here. Every once in a while you'll see me glancing up just to make sure I don't miss that. I'd love to hear your input. If you'd like to even join the broadcast and add something to the conversation, please let me know in the comments. Just say I'd like to join the broadcast, and I'll put a link in there. Thirdly, thou must hate his setting of thy feet in the way that leadeth to the ministration of death. He says mainly because you have to consider how unable the Mr. Legality, civility, the people that were told to him that could relieve him of this burden. He says you need to consider how the fact that they weren't able to remove this burden. He to whom thou was sent for ease, being by name Legality, is the son of the bondwoman, which now is in bondage with her children, and is in a mystery, this Mount Sinai, which thou hast feared will fall on thy head. So he makes a reference here to Galatians chapter 4 and verse 22. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 22. This is interesting. He says, Mr. Legality is the son of the bondwoman. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 22 starts with 21. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do ye not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondwoman, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. Verse 27 says, for it is written, rejoice, thou barren that bearest not. Break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For the desolate hath many more children than she which hath an husband. Wow, so that's interesting. The doctrine of works, the doctrine of legality, the law, is personified in Ishmael. That's very interesting. He likens this man, Legality, to whom Mr. Worldly Wiseman said, "Hey, can you can you join us? Can you go to Mr. Legality and get your burden taken off by him?" And this man Legality is the man. There we go. Forgot to add that there. Is the man Ishmael, who was born out of works, not out of the flesh, not after the promise. That's incredible. I can't say that I've seen the relationship or the personification, I guess, that Paul is making in Galatians chapter 4 and verse 22 and 27 of the fact that Ishmael truly was the fruit of the flesh and Isaac was the fruit of the spirit of the promise. Now, so he goes on to say, now if she with her children are in bondage, how canst thou expect by them to be made free? This legality, therefore, is not able to set thee free from thy burden. No man was as yet ever rid of his burden by him. No, nor ever is like to be. Ye cannot be justified by the works of the law. For by the deeds of the law, no man living can be rid of his burden. Therefore, Mr. Worldly Wiseman is an alien, and Mr. Legality a cheat. And as for his son Civility, notwithstanding his simpering looks, he is but an hypocrite and cannot help thee. What does this word mean? Curious, because I've heard something recently. What does it mean? Effectively coy, ingratiating. Yeah, so as ingratiatingly as Mr. Legality's son Civility, he doesn't have necessarily the professionalism of his father or as his friend Worldly Wiseman, but he looks a lot better, that's for sure. He appeals much more to the younger folks, but he's still a hypocrite and he can't help you. He says, where's this note that he has here? He says, believe me, there is nothing in all this noise that thou hast heard of these sottish men, but a design to beguile thee of thy salvation, by turning thee from the way in which I had set thee. He makes a point here at the end of the sentence and says, the gospel pays no respect to the demure looks and a sanctified face, but pronounces as cheats, hypocrites, and beguilers all who turn souls from the cross of Christ and the way of salvation by him to trust in any wise their own works for justification and salvation. It's interesting because it's the theme of every single page here of Pilgrim's Progress he's deifying the way of grace of Christ, and then he's making horrible and repugnant the way of works. On every single page he brings this up. And it's funny because I have been admonished before to one, read the book carefully, and two, don't read it at all because it was a book of works. It's interesting because it's like on every single page he's trying to make the point, this is not about works. It's about the grace and mercy of the gospel of Christ. And the gospel doesn't care about how you look. The gospel doesn't care about how you act. But if you attempt to show others or yourself a way to salvation besides Christ alone, the gospel pronounces you as a cheat, a hypocrite, and a beguiler. After this, Evangelist called aloud to the heavens for confirmation of what he had said. And with that, there came words and fire out of the mountain under which poor Christian stood, that made the hair of his flesh stand up. The words were thus pronounced, as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all the things which are written in the book of the law to do them. This is Galatians chapter 3 and verse 10. And it looks to be that that is a word for word quote, but Galatians chapter 3 and verse 10, For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all the things which are written in the book of the law to do them. It's funny because I've heard people read this exact verse and others through that are making this point. You cannot live by the works of the law because with it comes the curse. If you're not following every single law and you attempt to follow the law, not only guilty of the entire law, but because you're guilty, you bring the entire curse, every single curse that comes with not obeying the law. And I see people reading this verse and saying, "See, look, God didn't do away with the law. We still have to live by it. If we don't, then we're cursed." So this verse is proof. If we don't live by the law and we don't follow the law, then you're not saved. Then you're not truly a child of God, because how can you be a child and not follow every one of and not follow the law? And this is the language of those people who seek to bring you into bondage, to bring you into a life of a life of attempted self-justification, a life that's never fulfilled, a life that's never that doesn't end anywhere but in hell, that ends up without you in heaven, without you living the victorious Christian life. John Bunyan puts a note here at the end of that of Galatians chapter 3 and verse 10. He says, Legality is as great an enemy to the cross of Christ as licentiousness. Wow. I've never heard that word. Licentiousness? I'm going to have to look that up. L-I. Does anybody know what that means? Licentiousness. Licentiousness. The definition of licentious is being, I can't say the word, is being lacking in willpower or moral discipline, or being promiscuous or unwilling to conform to accepted rules. A person who is promiscuous without regard to the consequences is an example of someone who might be described as licentious. There we go. Licentiousness. There we go. New word for me today. So legality is as great as an enemy to the cross of Christ as licentiousness, for it keeps the soul from coming to, believing in, and trusting wholly to the blood of Christ for pardon, and the righteousness of Christ for justification, so that it keeps the soul in bondage and swells the mind with pride, while licentiousness brings a scandal on the cross. So he's not saying one is worse than the other. He's not saying, I would rather you be involved in false doctrine than in licentiousness and promiscuity. But he's not saying the other. I'd rather you be promiscuous, a fornicator, and not be a false teacher, a holder of false doctrine. He says these are as equally as dangerous to you as they are to each other. There's not one worse than the other, because they both keep you from the cross. They both keep you from coming to, believing in, and trusting in wholly the blood of Christ. And this, we're going to go ahead and finish this. I'm going to spend a little bit longer this morning and finish out this chapter 4, or at least I'm going to attempt to. Now Christian looked for nothing but death, and began to cry out lamentably, even cursing the time in which he met with worldly wise men, still calling himself 1,000 fools for hearkening to his counsel. He also was greatly ashamed to think that this gentleman's arguments, flowing only from the flesh, should have such prevalency with him as to cause him to forsake the right way. This done, he applied himself again to Evangelist in words and sense as follows: Sir, what think you? Is there any hope? May I now go back and go up to the wicket gate? Shall I not be abandoned for this, and sent back from thence ashamed? I am sorry I have hearkened to this man's counsel, but may my sin be forgiven? I'm going to pause there because he makes a reference to Psalms chapter 2 and verse 12. Psalms chapter 2 and verse 12. Is that right? Psalms 2:12. Okay. I'm starting in verse 1. Verse 11. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. So this is, oh no, I'm sorry. I read the wrong thing. So that's a reference to something he's making later on here. So let me start over. So he says, Sir, what think you? Is there any hope? May I now go back and go up to the wicket gate? Shall I not be abandoned for this, and sent back from thence ashamed? I am sorry I have hearkened to this man's counsel, but may my sin be forgiven. This is where he puts a note, not a reference. He puts a note here. Christian inquires if he may yet be happy. Legal hopes will bring on distress of soul and despondency of spirit, as well as outward sins. There is no hope of a sinner's being comforted by the cross of Christ till he is made sensible of this. What is that? That legality, the hopes of finding peace and freedom in legality and legalness will always bring distress and despondency. And in fact, I would say there is a common theme among folks in religion. And because this was not something that I didn't just see in my own self, but it's something that I saw as a common thread in folks in religion, was that despondency, distress was a common thing. It was so common. And this is what happens when you're trying to follow the traditions of men, man-made structures, following even the law, trying to follow the law to find your justification will always bring you into depression you cannot imagine. A depression that even Christian said, the suicidal thoughts. He was thinking of dying, of killing himself, this is it. I am not worthy to go on. And then then said Evangelist to him, Thy sin is very great, for by it thou hast committed two evils. Thou hast forsaken the way that is good, to tread in forbidden paths, yet will the man at the gate receive thee, for he has good will for men. Only, said he, take heed that thou turn not aside again, lest thou perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. That's that reference to Psalms chapter 2 and verse 12. Then did Christian address himself to go back. An Evangelist, after he had kissed him, gave him one smile and bid him Godspeed. Nothing, here's a note following that up. He says, nothing but the gospel of Christ can direct our steps in the right way and bring peace and comfort to our souls. It salutes us with a cheering smile and a kiss of peace and a blessing of consolation, and hence it wings our speed to Christ and holiness. Wow, that is the gospel of Christ. It directs our steps in the right way, brings peace and comfort to our souls. It salutes us with a cheering smile, a kiss of peace, and a blessing of consolation, and hence wings our speed to Christ and holiness. That's what the gospel is. That is what it is. It's peace, comfort, is not found in living better. It's not found in bettering your life, turning over a new leaf, rededicating your works. It's found in the gospel of Christ. Because in the gospel there's forgiveness. There's no condemnation. There isn't any. That condemnation you feel doesn't exist in Christ. That the unrest, that's not Christ. The condemnation, not I guess condemnation is the right word. The judgment that you receive is what happens when you live under the law. It's what's going to happen. The law, living by the law, comes with a curse. If you read the entire law, read through the law. If you don't do this, then this is going to happen. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. And Christ very simply said, you mess up on one of those, you're guilty on all of them. And then, so logically, you're not only guilty, since you're guilty of all of them, you're going to get the punishment that being guilty of all of them brings. And that's an extremely heavy burden. And that is not the burden of Christ. He is the only one that has been obedient to the law and suffered the consequences and even suffered the consequences of the law, which is death. He's the only one that has come back victorious. Jesus Christ is the only way. He's the only truth. If he is not alone where you find peace and comfort, I'm telling you, friend, you're missing out. Alrighty, well, it started a little rough this morning, but got warmed up, got the mic plugged in. I actually have I brought in an actual podcast mic, so I'm not sure when that will come in, but the mic that I'm using right now it's okay, but it's really designed for another purpose. But anyways, it doesn't look like I made it to Instagram today. I'll get that figured out one day. It worked. I did a test broadcast after this, and it streamed to Instagram, no problem. So I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on there. If you're interested in reading this book or getting it, following along, let me know. I'll go ahead and put a comment here with that in there. Anyways, guys, it is Thursday. I hope you all have a great Thursday. I hope you keep your mind on Christ. We have a promise from him that he will keep us in perfect peace if we keep our mind stayed on him. Don't forget that. I love you guys, and I will see you, Lord willing, tomorrow. Hey, thank you. It's good. It's good to know you're listening. It shows me who's watching, but it always says 0, and then I see people commenting like this. So, I guess somebody is watching. At least Heidi's watching. Thank you, Heidi. Love you. Hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.